The swift current threatened to claim her as its own when the wagon wheels struck the hidden boulder. Priscilla West watched in frozen horror as the world tilted sideways, her scream lost in the roar of the rushing river. Water flooded in through the canvas covering, cold and merciless, as the heavy wagon began to sink beneath the surface of the Colorado River. It was May of 1878 when Priscilla's carefully planned journey to Montrose, Colorado, fell apart in an instant. She had left her comfortable life in Boston, seeking independence and purpose as a schoolteacher in the Western Territory. Now, trapped in the rapidly sinking wagon, her dreams seemed destined to drown alongside her. Xavier Mitchell had been tracking a stray calf along the riverbank when he heard the crack of splintering wood and the terrified whinnying of horses. The seasoned cowboy sprang to action, watching as the wagon careened sideways into the river, the driver thrown clear but a woman's face appearing briefly at the canvas opening before disappearing beneath the churning water. Without hesitation, Xavier plunged into the frigid current. His boots and heavy coat weighed him down, but years of swimming in mountain rivers had made him strong. 3 powerful strokes brought him to the wagon, now half submerged. He dove beneath the surface, feeling blindly through the murky water until his hands found fabric, a dress, and then an arm. He pulled with all his might. Priscilla's lungs burned as the stranger dragged her from the wagon's watery tomb. She broke the surface gasping, coughing up river water as strong arms encircled her waist. Through water-blurred vision, she saw a rugged face, concern etched in blue eyes beneath a shock of dark hair plastered to his forehead. "Hold tight, madam," he shouted over the river's roar. "I've got you." The current pulled them downstream, away from the sinking wagon. Xavier fought against the flow, angling them toward the shore with powerful diagonal strokes. Priscilla clung to him, too exhausted and terrified to do more than keep her head above water. When they finally reached the riverbank, Xavier dragged them both onto the muddy shore. Priscilla collapsed onto her hands and knees, coughing up more water as her savior knelt beside her, his hand steady on her back. "You're all right now," he assured her, his voice low and steady. "Just breathe." Priscilla looked up at him, her honey-brown hair hanging in wet ropes around her face. My things," she gasped. "Everything I own was in that wagon." Xavier glanced toward the river where only the top edge of the wagon canvas remained visible before it disappeared completely beneath the surface. "I'm afraid your belongings might be lost, madam, but you're alive." "That's what matters." The driver of the wagon, a gray-haired man named Silas, limped toward them, his face ashen. "Miss West, thank the Lord you're alive. I was thrown clear when we hit that rock. I couldn't get back to you." "It's not your fault, Mr. Hendricks," Priscilla assured him, struggling to her feet with Xavier's assistance. Her blue traveling dress clung to her slender frame, ruined by the river water and torn at the hem. "Xavier Mitchell," the cowboy introduced himself, removing his soaked coat. "Foreman at the Triple R Ranch, just a few miles from here." He draped the wet coat around her shoulders despite its condition, an instinctive gesture of protection. "What brings you to these parts, miss?" "West, Priscilla West," she replied, teeth chattering. "I was to be the new schoolteacher in Montrose." Xavier nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Well, Miss West, Montrose is still a half-day's ride from here. First, we need to get you warm and dry." He looked up at the sky where dark clouds were gathering, storms coming in. "My ranch is closer than town. We should head there." Silas shook his head, looking miserable. "The team's scattered. Horse I was riding is gone too, might be halfway to Kansas by now." Xavier whistled sharply and a chestnut gelding trotted around the bend. "Copper's still here. He can carry double to the ranch." He turned to Priscilla. "If that's agreeable to you, Miss West," Priscilla hesitated. She had been raised with strict propriety, and the idea of traveling alone with a strange man to his ranch went against everything she'd been taught. But the alternative was to remain exposed to the elements with night approaching and a storm brewing. I suppose that would be best, she conceded, pulling his coat tighter around her shoulders. Xavier helped her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. Silas would follow on foot, he assured them, knowing the way to the Triple R. As they rode, Priscilla was acutely aware of Xavier's chest against her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. She had never been in such proximity to a man before, and despite her predicament, she found herself noticing the strength in his forearms, the clean scent of his soap beneath the river water. "I'm sorry about your belongings," Xavier said, breaking the silence. "The river's running high this spring. Happens every year with the mountain snowmelt. Everything I brought with me from Boston," Priscilla said softly. "My books, my teaching materials, my clothes, even my mother's locket." The realization brought a fresh wave of despair. "We might be able to salvage some things once the river settles," Xavier offered, though they both knew it was unlikely. "The men and I can ride out tomorrow, see what we can find downstream." Priscilla nodded gratefully, too overwhelmed to speak. The reality of her situation was setting in. She was in a strange territory, without possessions or proper accommodations, dependent on the kindness of a man she had just met. The Triple R ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling main house with several outbuildings, corrals full of cattle, and bunkhouses for the ranch hands. Despite her circumstances, Priscilla couldn't help but be impressed by the operation. "It's not what you're used to back east," Xavier said, noting her gaze, "but it's home." They were met at the ranch house by Mrs. Abigail Fletcher, the housekeeper, who took one look at Priscilla's bedraggled state and immediately took charge. Heavens above! "Get this poor girl inside this instant, Xavier Mitchell." The motherly woman shooed them toward the house. "What happened?" "No, don't tell me now. First, we need dry clothes and hot tea." Within the hour, Priscilla found herself wrapped in a borrowed flannel nightgown and robe, her hair combed and drying by the fire in the kitchen while Mrs. Fletcher prepared a hearty stew. Xavier had gone to change and to send riders to look for Silas and the scattered horses. "That man, Mrs. Fletcher said with a fond shake of her head as she stirred the stew pot. "Always bringing home strays, though usually they're four-legged, not two-legged." She smiled warmly at Priscilla. "He's got a good heart, our Xavier, best ranch foreman in 3 counties and the owner's nephew to boot." "I'm very grateful to him," Priscilla said softly. "If he hadn't been there—" She couldn't finish the thought. Mrs. Fletcher patted her hand. "But he was, and that's what matters. Now tell me about yourself, dear. Xavier mentioned you're to be the schoolteacher in Montrose." Priscilla nodded, warming her hands on the mug of tea. "Yes, I came from Boston. I completed my education at the Framingham Normal School for Teachers. When I saw the advertisement for a position out west, I thought it would be an adventure." She laughed hollowly. "I suppose I got more adventure than I bargained for." "Well, adventures have a way of working out in the end," Mrs. Fletcher assured her. "You'll stay here tonight, of course, and we'll sort everything out tomorrow." Xavier returned to the kitchen, now dressed in dry clothes, dark trousers, a blue shirt and suspenders. His dark hair was still damp but combed back from his face, revealing strong features softened by genuine concern. "Silas made it back," he reported. "He's getting settled in the bunkhouse. We found 2 of the horses, but the wagon's gone. I've sent a telegram to Montrose letting them know what happened and that you're safe with us." "Thank you," Priscilla said, looking up at him. "You've been more than kind, Mr. Mitchell." "Xavier, please," he corrected with a small smile. "Out here, Formality doesn't last long. Priscilla found herself returning his smile. Xavier, then. That night, lying in a borrowed nightgown in the ranch's guest room, Priscilla tried to make sense of her situation. Her carefully planned future had been washed away in an instant, along with everything she owned. Yet she was alive, thanks to the quick action of a cowboy who had risked his own life to save a stranger. She fell asleep thinking of blue eyes and strong hands, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Morning arrived with soft sunlight streaming through the curtains. Priscilla woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair when a knock came at the door. "Miss West, Mrs. Fletcher called. I've brought you some clothes. They belonged to Mr. Mitchell's sister when she visited last summer. She's about your size." Priscilla opened the door to find the housekeeper holding a simple calico dress, petticoats, and other necessities. "This is so kind of you," she said, taking the offered items. "Breakfast is ready whenever you are," Mrs. Fletcher informed her. "Xavier is already organizing the men to search the riverbanks for any of your belongings that might have washed up." After dressing and arranging her hair as best she could without her usual combs and pins, Priscilla made her way to the dining room. Xavier was just finishing his coffee, and he stood when she entered. "Good morning," he greeted her. "I trust you slept well despite everything." "Yes, thank you," she replied, noting how different he looked in the daylight, more handsome than she had realized, with a weathered tan that spoke of years spent outdoors and laugh lines at the corners of his eyes. "Mrs. Fletcher mentioned you're organizing a search." Xavier nodded. "We know the river well. Things tend to wash up at certain bends or get caught in the shallows. We might not find everything, but with luck, we'll recover some of your possessions." A rider arrived as they were speaking, bringing news from Montrose. Xavier read the telegram, his expression serious. "The school board in Montrose sends their regrets about your accident," he said, handing her the telegram. "But they're worried about starting the school term without supplies or proper accommodations for you." Priscilla read the message, her heart sinking. "They're withdrawing the offer," she said flatly. The telegram stated that without the teaching materials she had promised to bring, and with no immediate replacement available, they would need to delay opening the school until another suitable teacher could be found. "I'm sorry," Xavier said, and she could see he genuinely meant it. "What will you do now?" It was a question Priscilla had been avoiding since waking. She had spent nearly all her savings on the journey west and the supplies for her teaching position. Returning to Boston was not an option, not just financially, but because she had nothing to return to. Her parents were gone, the family home sold to cover her father's debts. She had come west for a fresh start. I don't know," she admitted, fighting back tears of frustration. "I suppose I'll need to find another position, perhaps in Denver or one of the larger settlements." Xavier seemed to consider something before speaking. "There's another option you might consider. We have several families on this ranch with children who need schooling. The nearest school is in town, too far for daily travel. The ranch owner, my Uncle Robert, has been talking about hiring a teacher for the children here." Priscilla looked up in surprise. "A teacher for the ranch? It wouldn't be like a proper schoolhouse in town," Xavier cautioned. "More makeshift at first. But there are 12 children here of school age, and my uncle values education. He was planning to convert one of the storage buildings into a classroom." Hope flickered in Priscilla's chest. "You think he would consider me for the position?" "I can speak with him today," Xavier promised. "He's currently in Denver on business but returns tomorrow. In the meantime, if you're feeling up to it, you could meet some of the families here. That might help your case when he arrives." The prospect of having a purpose again lifted Priscilla's spirits immensely. I would appreciate that very much, Xavier. Thank you. After breakfast, Xavier introduced Priscilla to several of the ranch families. The Triple R, she learned, was one of the largest cattle operations in the area, employing over 20 ranch hands, many with families who lived in small houses scattered across the property. The children ranged in age from 6 to 14, a mixture of boys and girls eager for education. Maria Delgado, wife of one of the ranch hands, had been informally teaching the younger children basic reading and arithmetic but lacked formal training. She welcomed Priscilla warmly. "My Jose is 12, Maria told her, and smart as a whip, but he needs more than I can give him. All these children do." As the day progressed, Priscilla found herself embraced by the ranch community. The women shared stories and meals while the men continued searching the riverbanks for her possessions. By late afternoon, Xavier returned with a small trunk, water damaged but intact. "Found this caught in some branches about a mile downstream," he said, setting it down before her. "Looks like it might have been in the wagon bed." Priscilla recognized it immediately, her personal trunk containing her clothes and a few precious mementos. "Yes. Oh, thank you." She opened it eagerly, finding most of the contents soaked but salvageable. Her books and teaching materials had been in a separate trunk, still lost to the river, but this was something. Among the items was her mother's locket, tarnished but undamaged, tucked into a small pouch in the trunk's corner. Priscilla clutched it to her chest, tears of relief filling her eyes. Xavier watched her with a gentle expression. "We'll keep looking tomorrow," he promised. The men found a few other items, some books, a writing desk, but they need to dry out. "I've had them taken to the tack room where it's warm." "I don't know how to thank you," Priscilla said sincerely. "No need for thanks," Xavier replied. "Anyone would do the same." But as Priscilla looked up at him, she knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would dive into a dangerous river to save a stranger, then open their home and community to her. Xavier Mitchell was different, a man of action and integrity, who seemed to embody the best qualities of this rugged Western territory. That evening, Priscilla helped Mrs. Fletcher prepare dinner, insisting on making herself useful. As they worked, the housekeeper shared stories about Xavier and the ranch. "He came here 10 years ago, just 18 and full of fire," Mrs. Fletcher recalled. "His sister had married and moved east, and Xavier was at loose ends. His uncle offered him work, and within 5 years he was foreman. Has a way with animals and men alike, fair but firm. The ranch hands respect him, and so does the owner." "He seems very capable," Priscilla observed, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Fletcher gave her a knowing look. "Handsome too, isn't he? And not married, though not for lack of interested ladies in town." She chuckled at Priscilla's blush. "Don't worry, dear, I won't tease. But I will say this, I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you in all the years I've known him." Priscilla didn't know how to respond to that, so she focused on chopping vegetables, her mind whirling with confusion and an unexpected flutter of pleasure at the housekeeper's words. Dinner that night was a lively affair, with Silas joining them to discuss plans for getting Priscilla's situation sorted. Xavier had received word that his uncle was returning a day early and would be at the ranch by noon tomorrow. "I've already mentioned your qualifications in my telegram," Xavier told her. "Uncle Robert is keen to meet you." "I hope I make a good impression," Priscilla said nervously. "I don't have my credentials or references anymore." "You'll do fine," Xavier assured her. "Besides, we have a telegram from the school board in Montrose confirming they had vetted and approved your application. That should be reference enough." Later, as Xavier walked her back to her room after dinner, they paused on the porch to look at the stars. The night was clear, with thousands of stars visible in a way Priscilla had never seen in Boston. "It's beautiful," she breathed, wrapping her borrowed shawl tighter around her shoulders against the spring chill. "One of the things I love most about this place," Xavier agreed, standing close beside her. "No buildings or smoke to block the view." Priscilla glanced at him in the moonlight, struck by his profile, strong jaw, straight nose, eyes reflecting starlight. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Jump into the river, I mean. You could have been killed." Xavier turned to face her, his expression serious. "I saw you in that wagon," he said simply. "I couldn't stand by and watch you drown, not when I had the power to try and save you." The honesty in his voice made Priscilla's heart beat faster. "Well, I'm very glad you did," she said softly. "Not just because I'm alive, but because—" She hesitated, then continued, "because I got to meet you." For a moment they stood in silence, something unspoken passing between them. Then Xavier cleared his throat. "You should rest," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Tomorrow will be an important day." Priscilla nodded, suddenly shy. "Good night, Xavier." "Good night, Priscilla," he replied, and the sound of her name on his lips stayed with her long after she retired to her room. Robert Mitchell arrived promptly at noon the following day, a distinguished man in his 50s with the same blue eyes as his nephew but gray hair instead of dark. He greeted Priscilla warmly after Xavier made the introductions. "Miss West, I've heard quite a tale about your arrival in our territory," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I'm sorry for your misfortune, but it seems the river's loss might be our gain." They discussed the potential teaching position over lunch. Robert had indeed been planning to establish a school for the ranch children and had already ordered supplies, which were due to arrive the following week. "The building needs work," he admitted, "but with a few days' effort we can have it ready. The question is whether you'd be satisfied with such an arrangement. It's not a town position, and the accommodations would be simple, a room in the main house until we can build a proper teacher's cottage." Priscilla considered his words carefully. "Mr. Mitchell, I came west seeking independence and purpose. I believe I can find both here, helping these children receive an education they might otherwise miss. If you're willing to give me the opportunity, I would be grateful to accept." Robert glanced at his nephew, a knowing look passing between them before turning back to Priscilla with a smile. "Then it's settled. Welcome to Triple R Ranch, Miss West. You can start as soon as the classroom is ready." Just like that, Priscilla had a new position and a new home. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity as the ranch hands, under Xavier's direction, transformed a storage building into a schoolroom. Priscilla helped clean and organize, while the women of the ranch contributed what books and slates they had. Xavier worked tirelessly, often continuing long after the others had stopped for the day. Priscilla found herself bringing him water or helping hold boards as he installed shelves and repaired windows. "You don't have to do all this yourself," she told him one evening as they worked alone in the nearly completed classroom. "You have other responsibilities on the ranch." Xavier paused, hammer in hand. "I want it to be right for you," he said simply. "You deserve a proper place to teach." The sincerity in his voice touched Priscilla deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for this, but for everything, if you hadn't been there at the river." "But I was," he reminded her, setting down his hammer and moving closer. "And I'm beginning to think that was more than just chance." Priscilla felt her breath catch at his proximity. "What do you mean?" Xavier's eyes held hers intently. "I mean that in 3 days' time, I can't imagine this ranch without you. I rode that riverbank 100 times before and never when anyone needed help. But that day, something told me to check the lower crossing. Call it providence or luck, but I'm grateful for it." Before Priscilla could respond, they were interrupted by Mrs. Fletcher calling them for dinner. The moment passed, but the memory of Xavier's words and the look in his eyes stayed with her. The school opened the following Monday with 12 eager students. Despite the loss of most of her teaching materials, Priscilla improvised with what was available. Her natural talent for education quickly became apparent as even the most reluctant students responded to her patient, engaging approach. Xavier made a point of stopping by each day, ostensibly to check on the building or make small repairs, but Priscilla suspected his visits had more to do with seeing her. She found herself looking forward to these moments, her heart quickening whenever she caught sight of him approaching. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the school opened, Xavier arrived with a package. "Came on today's supply wagon," he explained, handing it to her after the students had been dismissed. Priscilla opened it to find several books, readers, an arithmetic text, and a geography volume along with chalk, paper, and other supplies. "Xavier, this is wonderful, but how?" "I wrote to the school board in Denver," he explained. "Told them about our new school and asked if they had any spare materials. These aren't new, but they should help." Priscilla was overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "This will make such a difference," she said, running her fingers over a primer. "Thank you." "There's something else," Xavier added, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small object and held it out to her, a silver hairpin with a small pearl, clearly antique and valuable. "It was my mother's," he explained as Priscilla took it hesitantly. "I want you to have it. To replace some of what you lost." "I couldn't possibly," she began, but Xavier closed her fingers around it. "Please," he said quietly. "It would mean a lot to me." The gesture was intimate, personal in a way that went beyond mere kindness. Priscilla understood the significance. This wasn't just a gift, but a signal of his growing feelings for her. "Thank you," she whispered, and on impulse, she stood on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. Xavier caught her hand as she began to move away, his expression intense. For a moment, Priscilla thought he might kiss her properly, but instead he squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "I should let you finish your work," he said, his voice husky. "Dinner at the main house tonight," Priscilla nodded, her cheeks flushed. "I'll be there." As May turned to June, life at the Triple R settled into a pleasant rhythm. Priscilla taught during the days and spent evenings either preparing lessons or joining the ranch community for meals and occasional social gatherings. Her trunk of clothing had been salvaged and cleaned, and the ranch women had generously contributed fabric for new dresses. More importantly, she had found her place within the community. The children adored her, the parents respected her, and she had formed genuine friendships with several of the women, particularly Maria Delgado, who often invited her for coffee after school. But it was her relationship with Xavier that underwent the most significant change. What had begun as rescue and gratitude had evolved into deep mutual respect and undeniable attraction. They sought each other's company whenever possible, taking evening walks or simply sitting together on the porch after dinner. They hadn't spoken openly of their feelings, but everyone at the ranch could see the connection between them. Mrs. Fletcher had taken to giving Priscilla knowing smiles whenever Xavier entered a room, and even Robert Mitchell had commented that his nephew seemed uncommonly cheerful these days. The turning point came during the ranch's midsummer celebration, a tradition where all the workers and their families gathered for a day of food, games, and dancing. Tables were set up in the central yard, lanterns hung from trees, and a small band of ranch hands who played instruments provided music. Priscilla wore her best salvaged dress, a blue cotton that matched her eyes, with Xavier's mother's hairpin securing her upswept hair. When Xavier saw her, he stopped mid-conversation, his admiration evident. "You look beautiful," he said when he reached her side. "Thank you," she replied, smoothing her skirt self-consciously. "It's nice to have an occasion to dress up." As the evening progressed and lanterns were lit against the gathering dusk, the music shifted from lively tunes to slower melodies. Xavier approached Priscilla where she sat watching some of her students play tag between the tables. "Would you care to dance, Miss West?" he asked formally, extending his hand. Priscilla placed her hand in his, letting him lead her to the cleared area serving as a dance floor. "I would be delighted, Mr. Mitchell." Xavier's hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her in a simple waltz. They moved together naturally as if they had danced 100 times before. "I never thanked you properly," Priscilla said softly as they turned. "For what? For saving my life. For giving me a place here. For everything." Xavier's eyes held hers, his expression serious despite the festive surroundings. "You don't need to thank me, Priscilla. Having you here is thanks enough." The music swelled around them, but Priscilla barely heard it, too focused on the man before her and the words he wasn't quite saying. "Xavier," she began hesitantly, "I've come to care for you deeply. More than I thought possible in such a short time." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I've been falling in love with you since the moment I pulled you from that river," he admitted, his voice low. "Maybe even before, when I saw your face through that wagon canvas and knew I had to reach you." Priscilla's heart soared at his confession. "I think I've been falling in love with you too," she whispered. They had stopped dancing now, standing still amidst the other couples. Xavier raised a hand to gently touch her cheek. "May I kiss you, Priscilla?" Her answer was to lift her face to his, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home after a long journey. The kiss was gentle but filled with promise and emotion that had been building between them for weeks. When they finally separated, Xavier kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't want to rush you," he said quietly. "You've been through so much change already." "Some changes are worth embracing," Priscilla replied, her hands resting on his shoulders. "This feels right, Xavier." "You feel right." From that night forward, they were openly a couple. Xavier courted her properly, with Robert's blessing and the entire ranch's approval. They took Sunday rides across the property, picnicked by the river, well away from where her accident had occurred, and spent quiet evenings reading together or simply talking about their hopes and dreams. Xavier spoke of his plans for the ranch, his desire to someday have land of his own while still helping his uncle. Priscilla shared her passion for education and her newfound love for the Western territory she now called home. As summer began to wane, Xavier took Priscilla on a special ride to a hillside overlooking the entire ranch. They dismounted and spread a blanket beneath a lone cottonwood tree, the valley spread out before them like a painting. "I wanted you to see it all," Xavier explained, sitting beside her. "Everything that's important to me." Priscilla leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she had never expected to be when she'd first set out from Boston. "It's beautiful. You've built something wonderful here." "Not just me," Xavier corrected. "My uncle laid the foundation. And now you're building something too with the school." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Xavier shifted, turning to face her. He took her hands in his expression serious. "Priscilla, these past months have been the happiest of my life. What started as a rescue has become so much more. I can't imagine my future without you in it." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring with a small diamond. "I love you, Priscilla West. I want to build a life with you here if you'll have me. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Priscilla's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man she had come to love so completely. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, Xavier, I will marry you." The kiss they shared sealed their promise, tender and passionate beneath the cottonwood tree with the ranch, spread out below them, a visual representation of the life they would build together. They married in early September, with the entire ranch community in attendance. The ceremony was held in the schoolhouse Priscilla had come to love, transformed with wildflowers and ribbons for the occasion. She wore a new dress of cream-colored silk ordered from Denver, and Xavier looked handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked toward him. Robert Mitchell gave the bride away, and the local minister pronounced them husband and wife as the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of the schoolhouse. When Xavier kissed his bride, the cheers of their friends and neighbors filled the room. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with food, dancing, and toasts to the couple's happiness. As a wedding gift, Robert announced that he was giving Xavier a parcel of land on the eastern edge of the ranch property, along with lumber and men to help build a house. "Until it's ready, you'll stay in the main house," he told them. But a foreman and his teacher wife should have a home of their own. As they danced under the stars that night, Priscilla marveled at how drastically her life had changed in just a few months. What had seemed like disaster, the wagon overturning in the river, had led her to greater happiness than she had ever imagined possible. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, noticing her thoughtful expression as they swayed to the music. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best ones," she replied. "If that wagon hadn't overturned, I would have found you anyway," Xavier finished confidently. "Some things are meant to be." Priscilla Mitchell. The sound of her new name made her smile. "I believe you're right, husband." Their home was completed before the first snow fell, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and plenty of room for future additions. Xavier had insisted on a large study for Priscilla, with built-in shelves for books and a view of the mountains. Priscilla continued teaching at the ranch school, now with proper supplies thanks to Xavier's connections in Denver and some of Robert's business associates who had taken an interest in the education of the ranch children. She introduced new subjects: natural science, history, even rudimentary French, and started an evening class for the adults who wanted to improve their reading and writing. Xavier thrived as foreman, respected by the men and trusted by his uncle. In the evenings, he would often join Priscilla at the school to help with repairs or simply to watch her work with the adult students, his pride in her evident to everyone. Their first Christmas as a married couple was a joyous occasion. They hosted dinner for Robert, Mrs. Fletcher, and several of the ranch families in their new home. As they sat by the fire that night after their guests had left, Xavier pulled Priscilla onto his lap, his arms encircling her waist. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I do have some news that might make us even happier." Xavier raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Dr. Thompson confirmed it yesterday," Priscilla said, taking his hand and placing it gently over her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby next summer." The joy that spread across Xavier's face was everything Priscilla had hoped for. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply before pressing gentler kisses to her forehead, cheeks, and finally her lips again. "A baby," he whispered in awe. "Our child." "Our family," Priscilla agreed, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had saved her life in more ways than one. As winter gave way to spring, Priscilla's condition became more noticeable. She continued teaching, with the full support of the ranch community. The women shared advice and helped prepare for the baby's arrival, while Xavier worked tirelessly to add a nursery to their home, crafting a cradle himself from pine harvested on the ranch property. Their son, Robert Xavier Mitchell, was born on a warm July evening in 1879, a year after Priscilla had arrived in Colorado. He had his father's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair that promised to be as unruly as Xavier's. "He's perfect," Xavier whispered, holding his son for the first time. The wonder in his expression made Priscilla fall in love with him all over again. "He is," she agreed, exhausted but radiant. "And he has quite a story to tell when he's older about how his parents met." Xavier chuckled, gently placing their son back in her arms. "I think I'll wait until he's older to explain how I jumped into a raging river to save his mother. Don't want to give him any ideas." Life settled into a new pattern with little Robert's arrival. Priscilla took a brief respite from teaching, but by September, she was back in the classroom with Robert often nestled in a basket nearby or being cared for by Mrs. Fletcher, who had appointed herself honorary grandmother. Xavier proved to be a natural father, as tender with his son as he was strong in his work. He would often return from a day of ranching to spend the evening with Robert on his knee, telling him stories about cattle drives and the early days of the ranch. As Robert grew, so did the Triple R and the small school Priscilla had established. By 1881, there were 20 students, and Robert had hired an assistant teacher to help with the younger children. Priscilla focused on the older students, preparing several for further education in Denver or beyond. Their family expanded again in the spring of 1882 with the birth of their daughter, Emma Catherine Mitchell. Where Robert was all Mitchell with his dark hair and blue eyes, Emma favored Priscilla with honey-brown curls and warm brown eyes. "She's going to break hearts someday," Xavier predicted, cradling his infant daughter. "Like her father did," Priscilla teased, remembering Mrs. Fletcher's comments about the many young women who had set their caps for Xavier before Priscilla's arrival. Xavier's expression grew serious. "I never gave my heart to anyone until you," he said quietly. "From the moment I saw you in that river, I knew you were different." The years passed with the rhythms of ranch life: spring calving, summer grazing, fall roundups, and quiet winters. The children grew strong and healthy, with Robert showing an early aptitude for ranching and Emma displaying her mother's love of books and learning. In 1885, significant changes came to the Triple R. Robert Mitchell, now in his 60s, decided to step back from daily operations, officially naming Xavier as ranch manager with a substantial ownership stake. This recognition of Xavier's years of dedicated service came with increased responsibilities, but also greater freedom to implement his ideas for modernizing the ranch operations. Priscilla supported her husband through this transition, offering advice and a listening ear when needed. Their partnership had only strengthened through the years, each complementing the other's strengths and helping with their weaknesses. By their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, the Triple R was one of the most successful ranches in Colorado, known for its progressive methods and fair treatment of workers. The school Priscilla had built from scratch was now recognized throughout the territory, with former students going on to become teachers, business owners, and even a state legislator. On the evening of their anniversary, after the children were asleep, Xavier and Priscilla sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Xavier's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting comfortably against him as it had countless times before. "Do you ever regret it?" Xavier asked suddenly. "Coming west, losing everything in that river, staying here instead of finding another position in a town." Priscilla considered his question seriously. "Not for a moment," she finally answered. "What I lost in material possessions can't compare to what I've gained you, our children, this community, this life we've built together." Xavier tightened his arm around her. "When I saw that wagon overturn, I didn't stop to think, I just knew I had to reach you. I had no idea I was diving toward my future." "Our future," Priscilla corrected, turning to face the man who had been her rescuer, her friend, her husband, and her partner. The best one I could have imagined. As twilight deepened around them, and the first stars appeared in the Colorado sky, Xavier Mitchell kissed his wife with the same tenderness and passion that had marked their first kiss years before. Their love story, born in the dangerous currents of a spring river, had grown into something as enduring as the mountains that surrounded their home, strong, steadfast, and reaching ever upward. In the years that followed, the Mitchell family continued to thrive. Robert Jr. grew into a young man who combined his father's ranching skills with his mother's love of learning, eventually attending college in Denver before returning to help run the R. Emma, bright and determined, followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a teacher and eventually taking over the ranch school when Priscilla decided to step back. The school itself evolved into an established institution, with a proper building and multiple teachers, serving not just the R but surrounding ranches as well. Priscilla's innovative teaching methods became widely respected, and she was often consulted by educators throughout the territory. Xavier and Priscilla welcomed 2 more children in the 1890s, Thomas, who showed an early interest in veterinary medicine, and Grace, whose artistic talents brightened their home with drawings and later paintings of the Colorado landscape. As the new century dawned, bringing automobiles, telephones, and other modern conveniences even to their rural setting, Xavier and Priscilla embraced the changes while maintaining the values that had sustained them: hard work, education, family, and community. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903 with a grand party attended by over 100 people, including former students, ranch employees past and present, and friends from throughout the region. Robert Mitchell Sr., now in his 80s but still sharp-minded, gave a touching toast to the couple whose love story had become legendary in Montrose County. "To Xavier and Priscilla," he said, raising his glass, "who prove that sometimes the most dangerous moments can lead to the greatest blessings. May your next 25 years be as filled with love as these have been." Later that evening, as they danced under the stars much as they had at their wedding, Priscilla looked up at her husband, his dark hair now streaked with silver, the laugh lines around his eyes deeper, but his gaze still holding the same love and strength that had captivated her all those years ago. "Thank you for jumping into that river," she said softly. Xavier smiled, pulling her closer. "Best dive I ever made," he replied. "It brought me to you." And as they continued their dance under the vast Colorado sky, both knew with absolute certainty that their love story, begun in crisis, built through dedication, and sustained by deep respect and affection, would continue to flow strong and true, like the river that had first brought them together, carrying them forward into whatever adventures still awaited.